Hey everybody, it is 5 o'clock. Welcome to week 6 of Pitch World. We have one more week left on this. Next week is going to be live in Duluth at the Catalyst Festival. I'm super stoked to see a whole bunch of you live and in person at the festival. Got my new setup here. I got everything going on. I had to rearrange things, so unfortunately it looks like, oh wait, let me see if I can scoot everything over. So I'm still blocking my little lights. Nope, other way. There we go. We're close enough. All right, we are here, week 6, Pitch World. We are going through to the end of your pitch and beyond. Next week, when we are live and in person, we're going to be talking a lot about pitch performance. We're going to be going over some of the particulars because I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of people in that class that didn't get to experience the 6 weeks like a lot of you did. Go ahead and before we dig into anything, as usual, we're going to hold on a couple of minutes, let everybody get into the room here. But I'm super stoked to meet all you guys and to actually dig into some pitching in person. So as we're waiting for everybody, as I do every week, let me give you a little bit of background on myself, tell you what I'm up to, where I've been, where I'm going. My name is Carlo Gonzales-Moss. I am a writer, producer, and I was an executive. Ran my own animation studio for years. Also used to work as development executive for the Russo brothers at their company Octopi, which was their animation company. So pitching, for whatever reason, has always been kind of my thing. For years and years, I figured out that I had kind of a knack for it. And then I spent a lot of time being really bad at it. And then I spent a lot of time getting really good at it. And so it's something that I started my own company after I did my time being an executive, developing shows and everything. I realized that what I really wanted to do was work with creators with this process that we call pitching, because it's this walled garden that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to give away their trade secrets. And I look at that and I go, why? Like, let's all just make good shows. And if it requires us learning how to pitch, great. And I'm going to reiterate a point that I've made before, but pitching is to writing as auditioning is to acting. All right. So if you think about that, it's a different skill set. But at the very same time, even though it's a completely different skill set, you can be good at pitching and garbage at writing and vice versa. Same way as, like, if you don't get good at auditioning, you're not going to have a chance to act. And if you don't get good at pitching, you're not going to have a chance to write your show. You're not going to have a chance to actually make this show that's been sitting in your brain kicking around for forever. So it's a completely different skill set that at the same time is absolutely essential. As always, with my new setup, it's a little bit more of a trek to get it, but I got a trusty mug filled with water with me, representing RBG today. So there's that. That actually wasn't me stalling, though. I'm in a different chair, so I'm like trying to figure out how exactly I can block the light as best as possible. We were a little bit over to one side last week. So, all right, let's jump into talking about your conclusion. We're going to review some of the stuff that we talked about last week. I had a great question come in. And we're also going to talk about what's going to happen in our class next week, which is actually going to be in person and live. As you can tell, I got my fancy haircut and everything. I'm ready for the festival. I'm flying out of LA. I'll be there, I think, Wednesday. And then our live pitch class, as you can see right here below me, 4 p.m. next Thursday, September 30th. It's going to be at Zeitgeist Teatro. So if you're going to the festival, you'll see there's a few core places where everything's taking place. I believe Zeitgeist has 2 locations within it. And so we're going to be in the Teatro. So that is where we're going to be going over all things pitching. I'm going to be taking a lot of questions. I'm going to be walking through our basic structure that we talked about in this class, digging in a little bit more into performance, hitting all of those different points, right? We established our structure. We walked through it. We're going to talk a lot more about the particulars of what you do when you're in the actual pitch. How do you make it good? How do you make it sing? How do you take it from, hello, I'm reading things on a page that are about my show, to a dynamic, living, breathing thing that an executive walks out of that going, I have to work with this person. All right, so that's going to be next week live. But this week, we got business to get to. First thing I want to do is I want to give you guys a couple more recommendations. So the recommendation for this week is, I guess it could technically be called a documentary, called 6 Days to Air on HBO Max. If you haven't watched it yet, this should be required viewing for any and all writers and creators of any kind. So this was a documentary that the South Park guys made before, I mean, it probably came out about 10 years ago. But if you remember, when we were talking about our characters, and especially when we were talking about our episodes, we talked about the difference between story and plot and how we don't need a whole lot of plot. We talked about and then storytelling, how you want to avoid having too much of your episode description just be, and then this happens, and then this happens. I lifted that directly from 6 Days to Air. That's the South Park philosophy on writing, where you want a lot of different therefores, howevers, because ofs in your storytelling, because that's going to link everything together. So I'm giving you exactly the place where it came from. Go watch it, 6 Days to Air on HBO Max. And then two more recommendations that are going to feel like, to me, it feels like this is kind of basic, but it's like sometimes the most on their face, simplest things are going to be the most helpful to you. If you want to get good at pitching, go watch Shark Tank and Planet of the Apps. These are two shows where all it is people pitching ideas. By the way, Planet of the Apps is not on Apple TV. It's a ridiculously confusing setup. It's on Apple Music. It came out before Apple actually had Apple TV, so they put it on Apple Music and never moved it over. But both of these, just watch people pitch, because you'll pick up on little things where you go, oh, I see something that I don't like. I like, that's something that I do that I can adjust. Or you might pick up a couple of good tips and tricks. You'll be able to recognize really clearly, like, that person's really genuine. And like, just like, as you're watching it, check in with yourself and go, all right, who's connecting with me? Who's pitching here where I want to either buy their product or where I want to like get into business with them? That's the person that's compelling. And is there a piece of that you can put into your TV pitch? I'm a big proponent of looking in other places besides our industry for inspiration and lessons. I pull a lot from sports. You guys know that I use lots of sports metaphors, but looking at things like the business world, like to get inspiration or to understand better how to pitch. All right. So those are my three recommendations this week. 6 Days to Air on HBO Max, Shark Tank, Planet of the Apps. Go check them out. Now I have a question from last week that popped up that I think is really good. And then we're going to start jumping into the back end of your pitches, conclusions, and Q&A. But this question came through from John, who's just been really active in our classes and has been adding a lot. I love it. So John A. White wrote, I'm aware that many studios, networks, companies, or the individuals that work there either don't take unsolicited submissions in meetings, and or they require you to have some sort of representation to move forward. Do you have experience with this? And could you touch on what a good rule of thumb is to navigate that? Literary agent, manager, etc. So awesome question. I think when I was an executive, this is something that like I had to explain way more times than you would think. It was a pretty common question of how come studios and networks don't take unsolicited material? And also, how the hell can you get your foot in that door if they don't take that kind of material? So it's one of those policies that is the most frustrating and seemingly pointless when you're first coming up in the industry. But I can assure you, as somebody who's been on the other end, it exists for a bunch of very good reasons. So first, let's talk about the why, and that'll help inform what you do with this policy if you're stuck on the wrong side of it. So number one, the reason why it exists, if I open your email as a network executive or studio executive, and I happen to already have a similar project in development, it opens me up for liability, both from a lawsuit standpoint and from a trade secret standpoint. So if you send me an email and you say, I have the next great show, and I've already been developing something similar, then that leaves me open to the possibility that you're going to try to sue me when you see that on air. Even if I didn't, like, even if all I did was open your email and responded and said, thank you very much, but we can't, you then may try to sue my company, my studio, for stealing your idea. It opens me up to liability. It also opens me up to liability from a trade secret standpoint. Like, if somebody unsolicited emails me an idea, and then I have to email them back and say, oh, well, actually at Disney, we have something similar in development and we haven't released that for public consumption. I've just given that information to somebody who could be working at another rival studio, who might be, working for one of the trades. Like, there's no way that I can know who I'm sending that to. And I'm giving away free trade secrets of stuff that we have in development that might not ever actually even happen. And then on top of it, it's like, it takes a lot of work to go through all of those emails. If you were to open the door and have an open submission policy, executives' time is already crunched with the amount of things that they have to read. I can speak from experience as an executive. I was reading scripts all the time. So then if you add in anybody can send in a script, then I literally have no time to eat or anything like that. And then if I have to respond with things like, we already have something in development, thank you for your consideration, like, there is no amount of bandwidth in the world where I can actually do that. So the other thing, it also exists because it's at least a small way to vet the talent that's coming in. Because executives have limited time and resources, and they already have too much to read, they need a way to vet some of the talent that's coming in. If I have an existing relationship with an agent or a manager, I can trust their taste. Like, if we've been working together for years, I go, oh, well, Mike always brings me good people. So at the very least, I know this is going to be a good script if he's sending it to me. He's not going to waste my time. So that's why those policies exist. I hope that illuminates things, because I remember when I was young and I was coming up, I thought that was the biggest BS policy, because I was sitting there being like, I have all of these great ideas. Why can't I just send them to you and we can make them into a show? It's like a bunch of reasons. Now, if you're on the other end and you are sitting there and you don't have representation and you have a show idea and you want to pitch it, how the hell do you deal with this? I have bad news. The short answer is it's going to be a while before you get the chance to pitch that, at least to a buyer that can put it on TV. Like, you may end up with a great connection to like a small streaming platform, or maybe somebody who wants to finance it on a shoestring budget. Like, there may be somebody, but those big players that we're really talking about, it's going to be a little while if you don't have any kind of representation or any kind of credits. It's really hard to get any kind of traction as a writer or creator without one of those two things. And by credits, I mean like having staff TV shows with experience, and maybe you're either between managers, or, the last couple of years, a lot of us writers who were in the WGA, we had to fire our agents because of the ongoing contract disputes. So like those are the reasons why you might have a bunch of credits, but not necessarily an agent. But even like, for example, I don't have an agent right now. But I can still go out and get meetings because I have a lawyer and a manager who can regularly set those for me. And also, because I used to be an executive, I can also reach out direct to some of the buyers who I know and go, hey, I'm writing a show. I'd love to come in for a pitch. That kind of thing. So for most people, don't worry about the credits end. We're talking about if you don't have representation, because one follows the other. You get credits, and then all of a sudden, agents and managers start showing up. So in the meantime, while you're waiting for those agents and managers to show up with your great idea, what do? Well, you go out there and you make stuff. It's a simple answer. I wish there was more of a magic bullet, but you do things like you submit to festivals like Catalyst. You find friends who know how to direct, and then you go and shoot something. You make enough noise and you do enough good work until the agents start coming after you. And at the same time, you keep your ear to the ground for any of your friends that have reps that they really like and might be willing to refer you. But please don't be the person who, like, as soon as you meet somebody and you guys like sit next to each other at a bar once, you're immediately like, can I talk to your agent? Can you give me a recommendation? Please don't be that person. But like, if you have a big network of people and they know that you do good work, things tend to happen where it's like, oh yeah, I have a friend who's an agent. You should talk to him. Like I'll set up an email and connect you guys so that he can take a look at your sample. But do things like taking improv classes, getting into writers groups, and just make stuff as much as possible. And also like specifically write so that you have a writing sample. So when that agent comes calling, you have something that you can give them. You're not sitting there trying to knock something out in a night. Like if you guys watch the other two on HBO Max, they had a fantastic episode last week that was specifically about that. Also, this is going to be hard news for some of you, but if you're not in New York or LA, it makes things much more difficult, especially starting out. Like you can get to a point in this industry, especially now where everything is remote, where you can pitch and you don't need to be in New York or LA. You could literally be anywhere, but it takes time to get to that point, because what you need more than like being driving distance from an agency is you need lots of like-minded people that you can make stuff with. You need a town that has improv classes, that has people who are constantly on the go making stuff. And you can try cold submissions to reps, but where you just like, there's agency lists where you can just send, your writing sample directly to a bunch, like, hundreds of agents and managers. But my advice is you are better served taking all of that time, because it's going to be very time consuming, getting better at your craft, just becoming undeniable. Because ultimately you want an agent that sought you out, not one that you had to twist your arm to rep you and you had to put together a whole sales pitch about why you would be a good writer on their client list. I'll share with you guys the way that I got my first agent was I spent years at UCB and IO getting really good at writing sketch and doing comedy. And I put hundreds and hundreds of sketches online, on stage. I had monthly shows at some of the theaters. And one of my groups, we put one on YouTube, and you all might be familiar with this story. That ended up being, hitting, and that became Most Popular Girls in School. We ended up doing 150 million views over the course of like the next 10 years, million subscribers, 5 seasons, sold it to Universal, all of that stuff. But it took us a full year and a half after we started making Most Popular Girls for all of a sudden the audience to start showing up. It started hitting big. And then we started getting interest from agents. And then a friend of ours said, oh, you should talk to my lawyer. Like, he can really help you guys out with everything you're dealing with. So we hired that lawyer. And then he introduced us to a manager friend of his. And then suddenly we have an agent, a manager, and a lawyer within the span of a couple of months. So it happens like that. And that, honestly, is the best case scenario, because everyone involved in that wanted to work with us. And we had something that we could show. And we weren't sitting there like desperately hoping and pleading with these representatives to work with us. They were the ones pleading with us, like seriously, here's what we can do for your career. And then they were really motivated to work. The other piece of advice before we jump into to the rest of our pitching stuff, don't be precious about your ideas when you're first starting. Ideas and concepts, honestly, are not worth all that much. Execution is priceless. Getting really good at being able to execute those really good ideas, that is what is actually valuable in this industry. Because there are plenty of great ideas out there, but if you don't know how to turn that into a TV show, it's frankly worthless. So don't be precious about your ideas, sitting there like keeping them in your pocket, being like, no, this is the good one. I'm saving this for when I sell the show. Like, go out and make the thing. Just make as much as possible, John, those are fantastic quotes. This shit is chestnut checkers, Denzel from Training Day, and be so good that they can't ignore you, from Cal Newport. I'll also throw another one in there that came from Matt Besser, who's one of the founders of UCB. I remember going to a seminar at UCB when I was first starting out in comedy, and I took this to heart, and I still live by it, of just focusing. It was this exact question. It was, how do I find an agent? What do I do if I don't have an agent? It was 100% worry about getting good at your craft, getting so good that you are undeniable, and then everything else will take care of itself. And I know that sucks to hear if you're in the position where you're asking that question, but it is the God's honest truth. And I have been in that exact seat. I've been in that position, and I've been in this one, and I've been in the seat of being an executive. And that is the way that you want it to be. Get good, just focus on getting good, make stuff, and the rest is going to take care of itself. So that is, John, that was a fantastic question that you sent in. I think there's a lot more meat on the bone, honestly. But let's get back into our format. Let's talk about pitching. So if you remember last week, we spoke about, we took ourselves all the way through the rules of the world, all of those different optional things like tone. We've worked our way all the way to our conclusion of our pitch. So let's talk about concluding your pitch. This is going to be the shortest section of your pitch. It's going to be the shortest section of this class because there isn't a whole lot to it. You don't need to freak out. The biggest mistake you can make is putting too much into it. So the conclusion exists for you to just put a bow on your pitch. Tie everything else up, tie everything up nicely. Give us a little sense of, where you want the show to go. Bring everything together. Re-emphasize your excitement about the series and the places that it can go. So typically, when you're taking your conclusion, you're going to be taking it off of your future season section. Maybe you're going to work in one of your optional sections, but more often than not, it's going to be you talk about future seasons. You're looking long-term, and that's a natural step into, and we're done. Now, we don't want to sit there and go, all right, here's future seasons, and that's it. That is the last thing that we want to do. So the goal of the conclusion is just to land the plane smoothly. That's all we want to do here. We're not reinventing the wheel. We definitely don't want to give any new information because it's going to go right over that tired executive's head. All we want to do is sum everything up, bring it in for a nice, smooth landing. It's like if planes could just drop out of the sky and land perfectly and like park them like cars, then we would do that. But a plane needs to come down slowly, right? And that's the exact thing that we want to do with our pitch. That's why we have the conclusion. No more than 1 or 2 minutes. I've seen some pitches, and at that point, I can see, like I've had creators who are like, no, we want to get in this, we want to get in this, and we have this other information, we have this, and we have this. Leave it. Your executive is not hearing it, and it just comes off forced and awkward, and like you're trying to for lack of a better term, stuff 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. All right, so keep it short. The goal is to land the plane smoothly, elegantly. Think about just like you want everything to feel kind of effortless in that moment, right? You've gone through all of these, and then we circle back around and go, so, we, as you can see, we've got ideas for days. Like my go-to statement usually is some version of, I've just talked about like where we're going to go in like season 3 or season 4. And then I bring it back to, so, we are so excited about this show. Every time we sit down, it feels like we have 10 new ideas. We feel like it would be the perfect fit for, you guys here at HBO Max, Netflix, whatever, and what you're doing. And we couldn't be more excited. So thank you so much for letting us, share this with you. And, if you can find a place to get a little bit clever, great, bonus points, but also don't worry about it. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a conclusion slide. It should be something pretty simple and something that is very clear that it's the last slide. It can be a repeat of your cover slide. It could be, I've seen people do like a slide that says thank you or whatever. That's fine too. It might just have the title and your main character. But give that, because that's going to give a little shorthand to the executives saying like, hey, we're done. Just hang on. You're about to go to lunch. But the thing to keep in mind, once the executives see your last slide, a countdown clock does start for them in their head. They see that. I know what a final slide looks like. So don't sit on that last slide too long, because if you have that last slide and you're talking, it's like when you're in class and there's the kid who's raising their hand asking if we have homework, right? Everybody just wants to get the fuck out of the door, and there's one person holding us up. Like we see that last slide, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Regardless of if your pitch was great, it's human nature. When you get to the end of something, you're ready for it to be over. And then the last thing that you want to do is end with a strong, definitive final statement so it's clear that you're done. I think in my example, I really just now just completely biffed it, where I gave you a great example of what not to do, where you taper off, where you go, we're really excited about this, and yeah, so that's it. Thanks. None of that. None of that in our pitches. We want that strong, definitive final statement. We want that last sentence that says, and we feel like it would be an absolutely perfect fit here at HBO Max. And then the other nice thing, if you're remote, that's when your screen share is going to end. So it's a very clear indication that you are done. So make sure that you script that last line and script your entire conclusion as much as possible so that you're not ending with, and that's it. You want to make sure that you are ending with confidence. You're carrying confidence through the whole thing, and we definitely want to finish strong. We want to hit that nice, smooth landing. So yeah, that's the extent of the conclusion. Like I said, there's not a lot to it. Just put a bow on it. It's kind of like when you were writing essays in high school. It's just like sum up everything, remind us of any important points, but bring it home within a minute or two. Any questions on the conclusion? I'll hold it for a second while I grab a sip of water, and then we're going to move on to executive Q A, which is one of the most important sections where you can completely lose a pitch with the wrong answer. So all right, looks like everybody's clear on the conclusion. So we're going to jump next to the final section of a pitch. Don't think that the conclusion is the end. There is almost always a Q&A with the executive afterwards. Your exec is going to know this is coming, but feel free to prompt them if you need to. At the end of your pitch, if everyone's just kind of sitting there, maybe you have a young executive who kind of doesn't know how things work completely, and they're not asking a question or something, you can feel free, if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to discuss things with you. So expect questions from the executives, but don't be disappointed if you don't get them. This, I feel like, is a little bit of a newer thing that I've been seeing over the last few years in pitching. In the past, it was often pretty kind of perfunctory that you would ask some kind of question just to be polite. But what I've been seeing recently, and this, I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit, as I've become kind of the pitch guy and my pitches have become really good, I've noticed that executives sometimes will go, actually, you guys explain that perfectly. We completely get everything. I don't think we have any questions, In the past, that would have been a really bad sign, but the way that the industry has been moving is that can be an equally good sign. So when personally, when I was an exec, even if I hated a pitch, I would at least throw out one or two kind of, obligatory questions, either as a courtesy, not to be rude, or also to get the creator thinking about issues that they clearly hadn't considered. I might throw out some questions as a way to improve their pitch and to get them thinking about things that they need to think about and things that weren't there, and that's why the pitch kind of sucked. But if you get no questions, don't freak out. It can mean a few different things. It might mean you did a great job. You explained everything. We don't have anything that needs to be clarified. You're really good at this. And like I said, that's becoming more and more common. So it might be a compliment. Another thing that it could mean is the exact opposite. It could mean that they completely hated it and literally can't stand the sound of your voice for one more second. So literally both sides of the spectrum. It might also mean they really have to pee and can't tell you that. So the other thing, they might also have something else in development that's too similar, can't move on your project no matter how good it is. So there's no point in wasting your time or their time asking any more questions because they know they can't move on it at all. Here is the way that you can tell exactly what each of those, whether you did a good job or a bad job. You can't. You will never know what was behind them not asking questions. So don't drive yourself crazy trying to figure out which one it is. Did I do good? Did I do bad? Oh, I don't know. You did your job. You go out there and you focus on the things that you can control. Worry about nothing else. Easier said than done. But if you don't get questions, you just take it as, okay, cool, we didn't get questions. Awesome. But more often than not, 9 times out of 10, you are going to get at least one question from that executive. So let's talk about what the hell you should do when you get those questions. So first and foremost, the goal of the Q&A from your perspective is to convey to this executive that you know this show inside and out. No matter what they throw at you, you know this show and you have an answer for it. And if they throw something at you that you don't know the answer to, you're going to sit down and you're going to think about it. You're going to be the type of person that is not too proud to say that I don't know. You're going to be a great person to work with. You're going to show that off. Okay. But ultimately, you want to convey that you know this show, that you have thought about it. You've done the hard work that we talk about often, that comes with developing a show, that comes with going, no, we are going to do this story for this episode and not this one. This character is going to be this type of person, not this type of person. You've sat down and you've done that. You know this show. You feel strongly about it. You have a vision, and you are the type of artist who can carry out your vision. So how do we convey that we know the show inside and out? I'm going to give you guys a little spoiler. At the end of this section, I am going to give you some of my favorite questions that I would always keep in my back pocket when I was an executive, okay? So we're going to dig into like the deep, cheat code type stuff of like, here's what executives ask. Here you go. Here was my list. But if, talking more generally about the Q&A section, it is absolutely fine to leave breadcrumbs in your pitch to set up a question in Q&A. I believe we talked about this a little bit when we first introduced the idea in our first week of class. But let's say you have a piece of your pitch. This might be a little bit complicated. So if I don't explain it fully, feel free to give me a shout in the comments and ask a question. We will dig in more as we talk about it. But this is one of my favorite techniques. If I have a piece of my show where I'm like, God, if we cut this out of the pitch, we can save about 3 minutes. And 3 minutes in a pitch, as you can probably guess, is like gold. There's no time limit when it comes to Q&A, okay? So like you can talk, like you can get as many questions as the executive has a stomach for, right? So you don't need to worry about your time in Q&A. So you can leave a breadcrumb in your pitch that'll set up a question in the Q&A, where the executive is almost going to be prompted to ask more about it, right? If you leave a little breadcrumb and you go, oh yeah, and we have this this story in season 3 that's really going to turn everything on its head. That's a little bit of a thing to me that I hear as an executive. I go, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, I'm interested in this. Or I'm interested in this. Or feel free to leave little breadcrumbs. Don't do it a whole lot, because otherwise you're just going to sound mysterious and you're not going to sound like you know your show or you have a distinct point of view on your show. But feel free, if you can push something to the Q&A, do it. It's a great technique. Big thing with your answers in Q&A, and this is something that I am preaching to the choir, because once a week I hop on here and I talk for an hour straight. So as you guys can probably guess, I am super long-winded, and people who are not my friends would probably say that I really like the sound of my own voice. Actually, probably pretty much everybody would say that. But keep your answers brief. Make sure that they end with periods. Practice this. This is something that you have to get good at. You have to rehearse, and you have to do it over and over again. I'm telling you this from experience. I have had to sit down and beat out questions and go, all right, what are some things that they can ask me? What's a concise way that I can answer that? I want you to think about creating sound bites. Short answers stick in an executive's head. If you give a long-winded answer to a fairly straightforward question, I, as the executive, kind of start to get the feeling that you're bullshitting a little bit, and that you're trying to do the Michael Scott thing of starting to talk and just seeing how things will work out. Sometimes I start a sentence and I don't know where I'm going, right? But, like one of my pet peeves was always like, if I ask somebody, is the show 15 minutes or 30 minutes? And then I get a 5-minute dissertation on the theory behind the show. I was like, that's not what I was looking for. It's okay to have short, brief answers. Or if an executive asks a yes or no question, to say, yep, yep, exactly. You nailed it. We can often be afraid of that because we want to sound like, we want to convey that idea of we know the show inside and out. So I have to display for you that I know the show inside and out. Have the confidence to just sit in there and keep it concise, because that short answer, it's going to stick in the executive's head. That's why, like, if you get media training, they teach you to speak in sound bites when you're giving interviews. Keep it short, keep it concise, and make sure that your sentences end with periods. Do not end your sentences with commas. Don't push 8 sentences into one that are just one big long run-on sentence. Short, definitive statements. Have the confidence that you know what you're talking about, because this is your baby and you do know what you're talking about. Resist the temptation to explain everything. Like I said, you might get a very simple question. You might feel nervous that it's a fairly simple answer. And so when we get nervous, we want to try to over-explain. We want to make sure that you get it. You understand this, right? You get that I know what I'm doing, and you understand this concept. And it's like, no, yeah, I understand that the baby is a baby. I just wasn't sure on the names. I was literally asking you, like, is this character the baby, right? And oftentimes we find ourselves just living to create understanding for everybody and making sure that we are heard and that we are seen and that we are completely understood. A brief answer with a period at the end of the sentence conveys the confidence that comes from a clear vision of your series. I will say that again because I think it's worth repeating. A brief answer with a period at the end of the sentence conveys the confidence that comes from a clear vision for your series. If you know that show inside and out, you're going to be able to speak with the confidence of somebody who's been writing that show for years and years. All right, so that's the big thing with questions and answers with the executives is concise, end your sentences with a period. But we're not done with questions and answers. I'm going to call back to something that we talk about a whole bunch. That's a good question. Plus a sip of water. You're my favorite stall tactic. So when we go to pitch and we're doing it in person and we're sitting in the lobby waiting and the receptionist says, would you like something to drink? You always say yes, always. Don't be difficult. There's like the old Hollywood myth of like, ask them for something ridiculous so that they'll remember you. Please don't do that. Just ask for water. That's all that you need. You're going to be talking for 20 minutes straight. You're going to need some water. But then your water comes in handy when you get a question that you're a little bit unsure of or you want to think about for a minute. It's going to buy you a few seconds where they throw a curveball at you. And you go, oh my God, that is a fantastic question. I was actually talking to Mark about that, and the thing that he said was, right, and then you can go into your answer. It's just it's my little cheat code, my little trick of if I gotta buy myself a little bit of time, hey, it's something. So, and if you're remote, like I've said over and over again, put water in a mug. Don't put it in a glass. Don't put it in anything clear, because then the other person can see if you are fake drinking water to stall. So something else along those lines I also want to throw at you guys. Make sure you don't say that's a good question after every question. My wife works in the medical field, and she was telling me she was interviewing a person who seemed very, very put together and like she knew what she was talking about. But after every question, she literally said, oh, that's such a good question. Please don't do that, because it sounds so disingenuous and just sounds like complete and utter BS. So throw out, that's a good question if you need to stall, but please don't tell them that every question is a good question. And also don't be that patronizing person that like goes over the top with praise for a good question. So yeah, it's a little pro tip there. Also, if you haven't thought of something, be honest. Don't bullshit me. Like if you're a good bullshitter and you can come up with like a genuine answer, okay. But also like, I'm not going to take points off for you sitting there and going, oh wow, like we hadn't thought about that. I think that's something that we should go back and look at and that we can incorporate into the show. That tells me you're an amazing person to work with. Like obviously that's not your answer for every question, but if something throws you, just be a human being. Just be a person and be honest and go, yeah, we didn't think about that. But it's something that we can dig into. I think it's going to make the show better. If you're working with a partner, do not worry about being polite. This is something that I have done and that I have seen. Don't worry about being polite. As soon as the question comes out, jump forward with your answer as quickly as you can, because silence is death in this environment. You do not want radio silence. I also don't mind if someone's taking all the questions. You don't have to take turns. You don't have to feel like you're stepping on somebody's feet. Like if you and your partner, if there's some uncomfortableness about like who's going to take a question, just err on the side of getting rid of the silence and go for it. You can apologize later. And if you're the partner going like, oh my God, they're taking all the questions, stop taking that personally. You guys are a team. Get those answers out as quick as possible, okay? And that point about someone taking all the questions, as an executive, I've had shows that come in where it's very clear where I'm asking all the questions and one person on the writing team is taking all the answers. I do not mind that one bit, because guess what? The show might be more of their vision, and they might, the character might be based on them. It could be any number of things. I'm not deducting points and saying like, no, this other person needs to get their shots in as well. So yeah, no, all I want is the answer to the question. I don't care who gives it to me. On the flip side of that, be careful tagging on to your partner's answer if you're pitching in a group. Too much piling on can feel like you're overcompensating and over-explaining. And eventually, to me, listening to it, it just becomes noise. It goes back to that thing of like having a concise answer. Oftentimes, the best answer that you have is the thing that you don't add on there, is just letting your partner's answer stick as the lone answer. If there's something that they missed, cool, jump on and tag, but be really careful with that. I see it too much where people want to over-explain. I think that's ultimately what so much of this comes back to, is catch yourself when you try to over-explain. Coco Chanel rule, take one thing off. Last thing, we've hit on this. This is an example I love coming back to, but especially in Q&A, stay away from answering questions like the wife in Coming to America. If y'all remember Coming to America, the first Prince Akeem's first wife, all that she ever said was, whatever you like. He asked her, what do you like to do for fun? Whatever you like. Okay, well, what do you do when you're just hanging out? Whatever you like. What kind of music do you like? Whatever you like. I see this all the time with creators. It comes from a good place. It comes from, I want to be agreeable. I want to get money for my show, so I will do whatever it takes to get that money. If you want to make my show 15 minutes, okay. If you want to make my show 30 minutes, great. Whatever you want. You think you're being polite and you think you're being agreeable, but what you're actually telling me is that you haven't made the hard decisions that come with creating a series. So I want you to come in with a point of view and a vision when you pitch me a show. I don't want you to come in with the energy of, it can be whatever you want. What kind of show do you want? I'll make it for you. Like, this is not custom order TV show. Like, you come in with a story that you have to tell. And so I'll ask somebody, we're going to get into some of the questions that I like to ask, my cheat sheet here. But if I get the answer of like, really, whatever you want, that is a huge red flag to me. Because like I said, it tells me that you haven't sat down and gone through the pain that is required. Genuine pain. Like, it hurts sometimes to kill stories that you love, to kill elements of a character where you go, this is just too much. Like, we can't get everything across. What's the most important thing? That is a hard and difficult process, and it's a process that is only for professionals. And so when you come in and you tell me, it can be, whatever you want, you're telling me that you're an amateur. And so make those hard decisions. And if I don't agree with it, if I buy your show and I go, you know what, I think that this actually doesn't work, then we can talk. Then we can work. Hopefully the rest of your pitch has conveyed to me that you're an easy person to work with, that you know how to take a note and all of that good stuff. This is the moment for you to stand up for what you believe in and for what you've created and saying, hey, here's the best version of the show. If you disagree, you think it's something different, that's cool. We can still work together. But here's my point of view. Give me that point of view. Don't be the wife in Coming to America. So with all of that being said, let's come to my favorite questions from when I was an exec. When I was putting this class together, I went through a bunch of my old notebooks and saw a lot of questions repeated. And so I'm going to give you guys a little cheat sheet. So go ahead, get your notebooks out. Feel free to write these down. these are either some of my go-tos that I always like to use, or they were the first things that I would ask if they weren't hit on in a pitch. For example, if you don't tell me basic formatting stuff, like episode length, is it serialized, is it episodic, that kind of stuff, that's going to be the first thing that I ask, because I'm sitting there without a good idea of what exactly this show is. So that's going to be the first question that comes out of my mouth, is basic formatting stuff. If you didn't tell me how long your episodes were, I'm going to ask, what's the episode length? Is it, is this a comedy? What type of comedy? Is it serialized, episodic? The basics, those nuts and bolts that we talked about in your series overview, if you haven't hit them, I'm going to get them. That's going to be my first question, okay? Now let's run through a bunch of the other questions that I used to love throwing out. And the one thing that I'll keep in mind, that I'll remind you all of, I was usually coming from the point of view of a studio executive. So I was buying things to be sold to networks. I was not buying from a network point of view, okay? So a lot of times I would ask, what's the ideal home for this? Your perfect world, where does this show live? What network? And you can be as specific or as general as you want. But I always want to know, like, that tells me a lot about your show. If you see it living on HBO, or if you see it living on Freeform, or if you see it living on CBS at 8 o'clock on Thursdays, or if you see it living on the NFL Network, that tells me a good amount about what your show's about, right? All right, next question. If I was to give you an unlimited budget, is this still the show you want to make? And if it is, what would you do with that unlimited budget? How does that change the show? I always like that question, because it questions if this is the story that you have to tell, because that's what I want. I want you to come in with a show that you have to make, that you are undeniably the person to make this, that you would be making this show even if you were a billionaire, that it's the story that you have to tell. And then when I start asking them about, like, blue sky, unlimited budget, what are you putting your show, what are you putting that budget into? How are you making your show different? How, does that up-level production? Is that something specific where you would be able to dig into one thing that you had limited before? Are you only telling this story because it's cheap to do? Are you only doing animation because you think it's cheap, for example? Speaking of animation, if your show is animated, there's a good chance I'm going to ask if it has to be animated. Because when I was an animation executive, a huge thing for me was I only ever wanted to buy shows that had a compelling reason why they were animated. There had to be something that made the best version of that show animation. And that goes both for, like, high concept things where it's like, oh, well, Rick and Morty has to be animated because we go to all these bonkers worlds and we have all these crazy characters, and, like, it wouldn't make sense if it was live action. But there's also plenty of low concept shows, like, think of, King of the Hill. My mind's blanking right now, but I'm in the middle of writing a low concept animated show right now, and there has to be a compelling reason. If you think about King of the Hill, Beavis and Butt had a lot of Mike Judge animated stuff. The compelling reason is that the voice of the show is conveyed both through the writing but also through the animation. That is a different show if it's real human beings saying those things, right? Same thing goes for any kind of high concept piece of your show. For instance, if it's a mockumentary, I'm going to ask if it has to be a mockumentary. Not because I don't want it to be, but I want to put you through the ringer a little bit and see if this is the best version of the show. Because I only want the best version of this story. If it can be told better in another way, let's tell it that way. If it can be told better on another network, it should be on that network. I'm looking for the compelling reason why the show has to be the way it is and nothing else. Another question that I always love to fall back on is, what are some other shows that you've compared this to or that live in a similar world? Again, it kind of gets back to that, like, giving me more of a sense of how you view your show, where you think it lives. Gives me more information about tone. A lot of times I like to ask the creators things about themselves. These are all flavors, similar flavors, but what do you do better than anybody else? And I'll tell them, sometimes they'll be like, what do you mean? I'll be like, as a person, as a writer, whatever that question means to you. What's your secret sauce? What's your unfair advantage? Why are you the person to tell this story and nobody else? Like, I want that creator to know who they are. I need them to know who they are if they're going to tell a story in a compelling way. I'm going to run through some more questions here. If you're pitching me animation, what's your level of experience in animation? Same thing with any type of genre. If you're pitching me comedy, I'm going to ask, like, you have a comedy background? Did you go to UCB, IO? Like, none of these are disqualifiers, but it helps me know how experienced you are. And if you're ready to either run a show, sell a show, create a show, or if we're going to need to bring in another attachment to hold your hand, which is not a bad thing, by the way. Is there an A, B, or C story, or are we just following one person per episode? That's something that should be in your pitch. We talked about that when we were talking about laying out episodes, but I'll hit you on that if it's not clear, right? Could this, let's say you're pitching me a show that you think should be on Hulu or Netflix. I'm going to ask you, could this be a network show? Could this live on ABC? Vice versa. If you're pitching me something really broad, I'm going to ask, like, would this fit on a Netflix or an HBO Max or something like that? I want to see how much, like, how strongly you are tied to this vision of the show. And again, is this the best version of the show? What's the target audience for this show? If there's a similar show, I'm going to ask you how it's different. For instance, if you come in and pitch me a comedy that involves vampires, the first question is, how's this different from what we do in the shadows? I got tons of animation pitches. One of the question that I feel like I might have asked more than anything else was either, how is this different from Rick and Morty? How is this different from BoJack? Because those are the two comps that come up in almost every animation pitch. And so if your show is anywhere close to that, I want to know how it's different. I'm not like, and it's all of these questions, don't take offense to them. Don't take them as me saying, like, oh, you have vampires, you're just like what we do in the shadows. You have space, you're just like Rick and Morty. No, I want to hear you articulate the specifics, because I, as the executive, have to go and articulate that to my boss. So I want to make sure that I am conveying your vision as best as humanly possible. I might also go big picture stuff. I might ask, what's your ultimate goal, either with this show or with your career? Like, what do you want to do? I want to know, like, is this show a stepping stone to you, or is this show something that you have to make? Is it something that you feel really passionate about? Also, I might ask, who's your dream attachment? Who would you cast in this role if I told you could have anybody? And then one more question that's going to tie to our next thing. Is there a pitch deck? Which means you need to have a pitch deck. I find I always get this question. Okay, so you guys know my style, right? I always pitch with a visual aid. I've got that PowerPoint going as I'm going through my pitch. The question I always get is, hey, can you send us that PowerPoint? That's always the last question I get. And the thing that I tell them is, sure, of course, I'll send that right over to you. But also, we have a full pitch deck that actually lays everything out. So I can send that to you. It's completely built out. I'll get that over to you guys. And then that makes me look like I am going above and beyond already, and that I have a good handle on how to run a show. I'm making their lives easier because the pitch deck has all the words that they don't need to remember anymore. Because they're sitting there, if they really like it, going like, oh, okay, all right, so this is that character, this is that character, da-da-da-da-da. Now I'm giving them the cheat sheet just right there. So that then takes us to what you do after the pitch. So you're going to send a pitch deck. We're going to talk about how you do that. So immediately after your pitch, touch base with your rep. Your rep might call you, but reach out to them, either call them or via email. Let them know honestly how it went. Like, you don't have to BS with your reps. They are there to work for you. Tell them how it went. If you felt like you biffed it, like, be honest with them. Be people. Be a person. And then also tell your reps that you let the executives know that you'd be sending along a pitch deck. Also, if they don't ask for a pitch deck, let them know that you have one and that you will send it to them. So your rep will reach out and they will send, and then they'll send you your pitch deck. That being said, you might be going into a pitch where you are the point of contact, not your rep, either because you don't have a rep or you might have a personal connection with the person you're pitching. For whatever reason, if you are the point of contact, which I often was when I was working for Octopi, when I was working for the Russos, because I was the network or the studio executive, I was usually the person setting the meetings, and then I was the person following up. So my best practice, I would follow up with a pitch deck as soon as possible, later that day. I just send a quick email thanking them again for taking the time to chat with us about our show. And then I also throw in there, as promised, here's a link to the pitch deck for the show. I reemphasize, you asked for this. I'm giving you the thing that you wanted. Couple of best practices. I always send pitch decks in PDFs. I don't send them as keynotes. I don't send them as PowerPoints. I don't send them as Word docs, websites, anything else. I send them as a link to either a Google Drive or a Dropbox. I always send my pitch decks as links because the pitch decks that I build are always very big files, and I do not want to attach something like that and get an executive mad that I sent over, a 50 megabyte file that's now clogging up their email folder. I usually use Google Drive, but Dropbox also works. Just don't use WeTransfer or anything like that because those links expire and they're also hard to find. Like if I met with you 2 weeks ago and I haven't gotten around to looking at your pitch deck, I would like to be able to just look in that email and either, hit that Google Drive link or a Dropbox link. So don't use WeTransfer because then I have to possibly reach back out to you and go, can you resend that? I haven't looked at it yet. And then I feel like an ass. I then usually close that email, thanking them one more time, expressing how excited I am about the possibility of working together. So if you're a point of contact, this is a question that I get a lot. The absolute minimum amount of time to wait before reaching back out is at least a week. If I don't hear anything after 2, I don't freak out. I just very politely reach back out to see if they had a chance to look at it, if they had any questions. I frame it in a very non-confrontational way, just checking in, making sure that you took a look at it. Maybe you didn't. That's okay. Executives are crazy busy, and it's quite possible that after 2 weeks, they haven't even looked at your pitch yet, so just be nice. We all understand how it goes. If your agent or manager is the point of contact, absolutely under no circumstances should you reach out to the executive directly. That's a huge no-no. It's also totally fine after a week to reach out to your rep to see if you've heard it, to see if they've heard anything. They are also very busy, so give them the benefit of the doubt, and also don't feel hesitant about reaching out and getting your questions answered. After your pitch, if you get a no, I'm not going to give you any advice if you get a yes, go pop a bottle of champagne and celebrate. You won. That's awesome. Go do more of it. Great. If you get a no, if they pass, don't get discouraged. Pitching is 100% a numbers game. Ask your rep if there was any feedback. If you're the point of contact, it's a little bit tougher. Usually execs are good about at least giving one reason why they didn't pass. It sucks if they don't, and it happens sometimes. But the big thing is don't drive yourself crazy trying to figure out why they passed. Yeah, maybe they didn't like it. Maybe they think it sucked. But the likelihood is just as good that they have something similar in development, and that's why they pass. They might also just at the moment, their mandate might be very specific. They might also have very limited development funds. There are a ton of reasons why they gave you a no, and you can drive yourself up a wall trying to figure it out. Honestly, the little feedback we give you, it might also just be a piece of polite generic bullshit because we didn't want to tell you that it just wasn't very good. Personally, I try to give honest feedback as much as possible, but I also don't enjoy ruining people's days. And contrary to what lots of shows about Hollywood might tell you, most people working in this industry don't enjoy making people feel bad. All that you can do is focus on the things that you are in control of. If you did your absolute best in everything that you could control, then you should feel satisfied. Like I said, pitching is a numbers game. You keep going and keep putting good work in front of executives, and your stuff will start to sell. And if you get a piece of feedback from an executive or a note from them, you don't have to take it as gospel. All right. So I've seen creators get a pass from a network, and then they want to change everything based on that one executive's note. They'll throw away months and months of work that we all really believed in because one person said no. Have the courage of your convictions and don't suddenly fall to pieces based off of one note. By that same token, though, I've seen creators who also refuse to change anything even when it's clearly not working. So pitching is a market-driven game, and if the market is telling you that this is not a TV show, then you do need to do some reevaluating. Look at the notes that you're getting. Are they all the same? If so, that's a red flag that this thing isn't working. All of this is leading to a giant piece of just overall advice for you as a creator. Get good at receiving notes. Figure out which notes are actionable and which ones are not. Don't take it personally and don't get defensive, because there is nothing worse than a creator who thinks that all executives are idiots and just no one gets his brilliant vision. Like, that person sucks. There's a reason why they're not selling anything, okay? I love this comment that we just got from Facebook. I learned as an actor, they might not like you for this role, but they do like you, and an audition where you don't get the role may do you more good in the long run. The exact same thing is true of pitching. It is all about relationships. So one of the advantages that I have when I go in and I pitch is I've pitched most places, and I've pitched most places a lot. And I've developed a reputation that even if my show isn't right for your network right now, you're going to spend those 20 minutes entertained. You're gonna see a pitch that's been worked over and that has had like the work go into it. And so when I walk into a room with executives now, they get excited, they get happy. They're going to see, like, they're not going to waste 20 minutes. You are building relationships with these people, because also you don't know where somebody's going to get promoted to. You don't know who's going to be a buyer where. Same, when I was an executive, like, I didn't know what was on the horizon for me, 6 months, a year from them. So you never know where that person is going to grow to. Build relationships, get to know people, and get good at pitching, and people will recognize it. It's a numbers game. It's a time game. Please, please, please just keep putting it in. Know that eventually it will come through. We are over an hour, everybody. That is the end of our remote pitching classes. I can't believe it. I've just been talking your ears off. Once again, a reminder, I do this professionally for a living. This is my job. After I left my last exec job, I started my own company. It's focused entirely on pitching. It's called MARANTY. It's named after my grandpa's old boat. Go to maranty.com. For all of you Catalyst members, enter the promo code Catalyst. Your first class is free. I literally, one of the people in here, we got a class. We've got a chat tomorrow to talk about some coaching. It's completely free. They're taking advantage of it. I really hope you do too. These sessions are usually $100 a pop, so that's a free $100 that you're getting. Promo code Catalyst. I do pitch coaching. I also build pitch decks with my company. So please take advantage of that. And then even more importantly, next week we are live in person at the Catalyst Festival, 4 p.m. next Thursday. That's local time there, September 30th. The Zeitgeist Teatro. So you're gonna, if you've already looked at your schedule, you'll see the locations where everything's taking place. One of those is the Teatro at Zeitgeist. So we're gonna be there. We're gonna be doing stuff live. Please, if you're watching this, if you're gonna be at Catalyst, please prep some questions. I would love to have you to come in at the top with some questions that you guys have prepped. I will make sure that they get read and addressed. And also, even if you're not going to be there in person, I know that it's going to be recorded. I believe that there will also be an associated stream either during or after. So you will be able to see it even if you're not there. But if you're not going to be there, please feel free to send in questions as well. If you guys send me questions ahead of time, either go on to maranty.com, send me questions there, or hit me up on social media at Carlo Moss across everything. I will make sure if you send a question ahead of time that it gets read during that class and that it gets addressed. So all of that being said, I will see some of you next Thursday in our live class. It has been a pleasure working with all of you, teaching you pitching. I hope that I will, get to work with y'all more, do some pitches together, do some pitch coaching, all that good stuff. And I look forward to hearing about how many shows you all have sold in the next coming years. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out. You guys are all awesome. And that is the end of that. Bad conclusion. All right. Have a good one, everybody.